Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Relative Pitch. We are so excited to be doing, honestly, our first ever collab with another music podcast. So we are so excited to have the wonderful people over there at the Score Podcast join us today. So everybody, welcome the Score Podcast, Justin and Eric. Hey, how are y'all doing?
We're good.
Doing good. Glad to be
Yeah,
here. Thankful for the
definitely can't complain.
opportunity. Thankful for the opportunity to jump on and just partner, man. We
Amen.
love we still pinching ourselves every time we record, every time people call us and email us. Eric is like, "Hey, did you read the email?" I was like, "Yeah, I didn't believe it." Is this like for real? Are people playing? So, we glad to be here, man.
Everything that Justin just said, ditto. Yeah.
It's funny. Yesterday, I was just having this conversation with a friend of like, how many like actual music podcasts are there out there? I was like, well, there's one for sure. And I was like, I gotta plug y'all too, and I plugged Triloquy and everything. But I was like, we're out here, like, and it's actually very interesting because you guys being, and we're gonna talk about this. Your focus on music education because Anthony was mu ed too. Michael started off as mu ed, and music education was obviously such a huge part of my life. It is a topic that we very like heavily invest in ourselves with our time here on Relative Pitch. So I can't wait to hear a little bit about how the idea that I love a good origin story. So maybe, I mean, before before we like get into that though, we got to meet you. Like, who are you as like individual humans before we get into like what your podcast is about?
That's a
Eric
good
has a
one.
much more exciting life, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it up. Go ahead, Eric. You got it, baby.
I can kind of summarize that now as a consultant, clinician, conductor, podcaster. But I truly live in several worlds. I am a proud child of immigrants. Proud product of Houston Independent School District, the large urban school district as well. A proud alumnus and former faculty member of Prairie View A&M University, and so now I'm finishing up my doctorate in music education with a minor in arts leadership at the University of Houston. So now I have experience in being an industry professional. Spent a little bit of time with Hal Leonard, and now I proudly serve Consumer Incorporated in three different capacities. I serve the Southwest United States, the West United States, and also Mexico as the educational support manager. And so I'm just trying to always find, and I just to preface this, like a good friend of ours, Dr. Corey Mills, when we were talking about me going back to the University of Houston, now because of my experience of living in those kind of worlds, I'm like, okay, if I go back to do my doctorate and finish it up, I want to create products. I want to create resources that truly make the impact. Instead of just talking about it, I want to be about it. And so that's one thing that I do try to challenge academia is that I didn't want to be the publish or perish type of professor. I wanted to use that knowledge to help our profession and help even unselfishly, if it doesn't impact me, that it impacts the next generation, right? So there's a lot of void that I experience or lack that I experience that I don't want that to happen for the next kiddo or the next teacher, and I want to find ways to supplement that by empowering my communities and friends. So more to talk about that, but that kind of, and then I got a shout out. I got a proud wife and my two kiddos that are trying to stay as quiet as possible in the other rooms right now as we record. So if they get to watch this, shout out to them and shout out to Sochi.
Yeah, so I think what Eric speaks about is really what has drawn us together. A lot of people don't know this, and we'll get into this, but it kind of helps tell you a little bit about me. We are connected not only because of music, but really we just had this passion to help people. We really have a desire and a conviction to make sure people are in the know in whatever capacity. And so, in this season of both of our lives, for me, I'm working as a community coordinator under our church umbrella for just different governmental grants that help bring aid to our students in HISD we're trying to keep them from dealing with substance abuse at an early age, specifically in environments where you may not see a future outside of 288 or 610 South or Cullen, right? So I do part of that, and then the other end of that is I work as a student pastor for all of our middle school, 7th and 8th grade students, and our 9th through 12th students at the church that I attend. And so, oddly enough, a lot of my kids that I teach at my church and do life with, they are in band programs. So they are inviting me to their, hey, listen to my region recording. They're telling me they made ones at UIL and they're going to area. And so that's such a great thing that I still get to do. But at the heart of it, I still get to pour into kids and really try to help their future in whatever capacity. I had a message from one of my former students at Hightower before I left there to move into what I'm doing now. She sent me a message on Instagram. She said, "Hey, Mr. McLean, this may seem a little weird, but I just wanted to say thanks. I'm 3 months into college, and a lot of what you did for me has really helped me. Like me coming into your office in the percussion room and you listening to me or helping me with my music or just listening to some of my problems, it really has shaped and changed me. And I don't think I would be where I'm at right now in college if it wouldn't have been for that. And I think that catapults where we are. Like for me, I'm just a person that comes from teachers. My mother was a teacher. My mother was an educator. My grandmother taught. And so I just fell in love with it as a young child, got an opportunity to teach in the school setting. And though I'm not in a classroom anymore, I still have access to all of these students and their lives. And then most of my kids that are now sophomores in college, graduating college, still text me, email me. Can you listen to this? Hey, I need some advice on this. Hey, can we meet for lunch? Hey, I'm going through this right now. And so just to know that you can plant seeds that may not bear fruit till later is that's the passion by which we do all of the things that we do. And then, I'm married. I'm blessed to have a beautiful partner in B, and we got 4 kids. So like I tell everybody, Eric doing his 2, he stays safe. I'm on the rough side of the mountain, and I need your prayers. I need your
Oh, Lord.
No, my kids are good. They 10, 9, 5, and 4. So, man, I can't complain. I get to do what I love, and I get to sit and talk with people like y'all. So it's all good.
That's so amazing. I'm listening to all of y'all's jobs and all the umbrellas that you have to hold between both of you. It's like, y'all, kudos to you, okay? Kudos to you. But something I really kind of just took from all of that is this idea that it doesn't end after the student leave your band room, whether that is, after they graduate or when they go home. It's way more about, pouring into the students into their whole lives, because we are educating the whole student, not just part of them. Can you two both talk about that, as you were just talking about, students still call and respond, and both of your community work in your communities, like that pouring into students, that's what led y'all to creating the things that y'all have created thus far?
That's a good one. And this was before dipping in my toe into research and trying to get into black and white. Some of the things that we experienced as students with some of the mentors that we had and some of the icons in the band world here in the Houston area. And, when you start digging into some of the themes that, where a lot of urban music educators will define as success in their music programs, it boils down to the individual kid. A lot of it wasn't talking about programmatic goals. And if they did, it was because of the focus on the individual kid. And so I got to see some of our elders, if you will. Charlie Stevens, for one, that just passed away last year. He did over 40 years at one high school, an HBCU grad from Florida A&M University, and then broke barriers within the core style scene here. And he started doing Prince shows in the 80s when it wasn't as common in the Houston area, right? Although FAMU was doing it. So I can remember these specific anecdotal moments, though, of Mr. Stevens probably going off on a child, and then he had that reputation, right, like with the old school band directors that, they threw stands or they said select words, and we can say those war stories, but a lot of times people didn't realize the post effect that he had, and that was usually of him stopping the child and saying, "Come see me in my office. Hey, I'm a little bit more intense with you today because I know you have more in you. And I know you were slacking, and I know I can bring it out of you. So can I have more of your attention, be more readily available for rehearsal tomorrow?" "Yes, sir, I'll do that." And that child will come back and have their part locked in. That interaction that most of the times people didn't talk about or articulate or even celebrate. And it was that part that I started focusing on, is if I'm going to hold a child to a higher standard, I'm going to follow it up with nurture, with care, with guidance, with mentorship. And that ability of doing that, I hope we were trying to kind of relive that and through ourselves by the effort that they made on us to focus on them. And so one of the things that I truly tried to focus, and I did this kind of late, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I did go in focusing on like, we got to get straight ones because we're from an HBCU and people already think we can't do it. So we had a chip on our shoulder to come in there and kind of break down some walls too. But we got to a point where, like, at what cost? Because there were a couple times where we got the sweepstakes, but then I wasn't good, or Justin wasn't good, or our house wasn't good, right? Or our relationships weren't good. But we got that one though, right? And so we got to a place where we're like, okay, we're going to work. And when we get in here, we're going to work our butts off. But not to our extent, not the cost of us, not at the cost of our house, not at the cost of our relationships. So we do as much as we can with the time that we have, and we come back and hit it again. And so because of that, that led us to just focus on the kid, the focus on the child, focus on the individual student, and that could be situational, financially, emotionally, etc. Right? Like it was a myriad of reasons of what we were able to do, but we pretty much had an open door policy, and that allowed us to interact with those kiddos. To this day, we're getting those messages, we're getting those emails. Mr. Jimenez, can you come help my band now? Right? Like our former band students now are band directors. We're getting invited back into to spaces that we typically wouldn't have gotten invited into, right? Like we're now clinicians at some of these other band programs where they wouldn't even had batted an eye to us as a band director. So because of that, we have this metaphor, if you will. It's kind of like we walked in through the door, but we're saying like, come on, join me. So we're real big on, it doesn't have to be us. It can be somebody else that we trust and we can put our name behind, because we know there are a lot more people like us that are willing to serve, that just are waiting for that opportunity to say, give me a shot, give me a chance. So that's kind of where we're at now, even though most would look at us and be like, well, y'all are just getting started. And it's like, but we also don't want to be 80 years old, like still on the circuit kind of thing. So we're already challenging that notion of saying we don't have to be that person, but if we are, we're honored. So if it means that we can recommend somebody else, by all means, we put our name behind them too, and we start opening those doors for people like us.
Yeah. I would also say that I think it's the buzzword that I think we use in music spaces, but we really don't. We really don't put any work behind it. One of the things that I think me and Eric really just are, even outside of what we've learned as far as educating and our musicianship, we just relationship people. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think once we found that, and we was like, oh, that's the thing. Most directors are building relationships for ulterior motives, if I'm being honest, right? I'm for you as long as we can do the things we need to do. And I think Eric and I genuinely cared for our kids, like whether we are, I mean, now, are we competitive? Do we want, yes. But we've literally told kids, I've heard him say it in front of me and vice versa. Whether you stay in the band program, whether we get a one, whatever, we care about your sanctity as a person. And I think once kids are able to trust that, I think it just opens up a door for success, because I think kids are looking for two things: honesty and consistency. And that's what I like to think that me and Eric tried to provide for all of our students. Now, we could tell you all of the glory stories, but we got some horror stories as well. But the heart of what we were doing and what we try to do, the reason why kids still connect with us, call us, hit us up, is because we just developed real relationship. It was like, when I'm asking you how your family's doing before class starts, I'm not doing that because pedagogy and in services have said, let's show care for the kids. No, I genuinely want to know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what did y'all eat last night? Because I ate Chick-fil-A, and I know y'all be eating good at your house. Like, so what's really good? You know what I'm saying? So I think the word that if you were to kind of hone in and say what sums it all up, what summed up your time in the classroom and where you are now, it's relationship. That's
Real.
it. Like, I could give you pedagogy things that I've learned, that Eric has taught me, that we've come up against in our studying the score, but man, it's relationship. That, like, the kids showing up, being there when they don't have to be, it's relationship. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's the relationship building is so important, and it's something that I really try to emphasize whenever I do like career in the arts talks for students a lot with my role at the Seattle Symphony. And a big thing that I really try to say is like, it really carries with you throughout your life. If you have a really amazing band class, choir class, orchestra class, these students could be someone who one day is running Google, right? Or
Yeah.
running Microsoft. You never know who they're going to turn out to be. And they were like, I had the most amazing music educator who I almost was a music educator because of them. And that was like a story for me too. Like my band director, middle and high school, was the same person, a black man, and it was so significant to like my life as a musician and as what I do now as an arts like administrator and activist. And because of what the values he instilled like in me and like the care that I felt within that like classroom, it's something that I still am able to like share out today. So you know, because absolutely, I have seen the opposite side of that too, where it's like they only care about the scores and they only care about if you're in their program, and as soon as you're not, you're dead to them basically, and that doesn't do anything except for leave a bitter taste in that student who is going to end up being someone possibly who could save a band program someday, who could offer funding to someone to go on that tour that changes the trajectory of a band program. So it's not just up for us to instill in the students that even if you don't become, you know, an orchestral musician or play in a band someday or go on to, you know, do President's Own, whatever, you can still have music as a part of your life and still find value in that. But if they have a negative experience because you don't care about them as a human being, then how could you blame them for wanting nothing to do with it once they leave your classroom?
That's real.
Yeah.
Correct. I work at a university as a trumpet professor, and I believe wholeheartedly every university is a research institution that is for the community that it serves. It's for the kids that are at the university, but it's for the community at large. Because if we're not serving the community at large, then why are these big institutions getting all this money from the states? And so, like, when I go out and recruit, my university is not for everybody. We are in the hills of Georgia.
The sticks. The sticks. Call it what it is.
And it's not for everybody. I mean, it's barely for me. And so like when I'm recruiting, because I'll tell you, I like the city, and this is not a city. And like I'm looking out my window at a mountain. I'm like, that's a real cute mountain. I would never
remember you have a job. Please remember you have
remember.
No, I love it. No, again, I love it. But to be the story is like I'm recruiting kids and staying with them and visiting these band rooms. I'm like, use me as a resource. You don't have to come to my institution for me to help you. I will help you read your anything that you need to read. I know these other trumpet professors. I know these other professors. Let me text them for you because I think you would be a way better fit there than my institution. And it's not like transactional. And something Lauren was talking about, y'all talked about, I can tell when you go in these band rooms and you like recruit and hang out with them, is like if the kids are hanging out in the room, something's right. If the minute band class is over, they dart out, then that's how you know it's very like, I'm in band to get my A and play this instrument, and then I'm leaving. And that's where you can tell the connection or the culture that we like to call, or relationships, is either there or not there. And sometimes band directors don't really care for it to be there, I think. They're like, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do because I'm going to teach 5 years at this school. Then I'm going to launch to this county that pays better, but also has that reputation. And then after those 5 years, I'm going to launch to the best of that county. No, so the same county, almost the same kids. It's just like, how can I get myself further on the ladder by using kids that are in front of me?
But I think what you're talking about, what I hear from Lauren and from you, Michael, is that there has to, and we talk about this all the time, being a music educator, whether you're choral, orchestral, whatever, it is a room of egos. And because there are so many egos in the room, inherently what we're trying to do is hide our insecurities. So if I'm going to hide my insecurity, I'm going to make all of you that are a part of what I'm doing very minimal as to not answer to or expose who I am. And so, you know, when I hear Lauren say, hey, whether you are going to continue or not, that takes a level of care for a person. Just the dignity of a young woman or a young man to say, you could be really good at this and make my name greater, but I'm just going to let you be good. And if you come in the office and be like, hey, I'm thinking about going to school for architecture. Hey, what schools are you looking at? I'll look at some schools. Like I've heard Eric say, hey, I know these people because of my frat brothers. I'm going to set you up with a meeting so you can get that resource. Like that doesn't negate what you're doing here in my program, but it also helps me build a bridge for you. And if all we do is use kids to build our bridges, I just think it's just, I don't have respect for that, because what are we telling that kid?
Right.
What are we exposing them to? You know what I'm saying?
It's just like, you know, over here, in my part of Houston, we just had our region band auditions, and
bless your heart,
you know, I just sat through 90 something clarinets. Yes, those. We had
middle school or high school.
Bless your heart.
Yes.
You know, somebody was praying for me yesterday, and you know who was praying for me? Thank you, because I needed them. I needed that. But you know, something I've noticed throughout my teaching time is, you know, those band directors who pride themselves on, well, I had 26 people placed in this band. It becomes a commodity rather than the actual human. What did they get throughout this process? Did they enjoy learning about this new music? Did they enjoy the process? Because that's what we should be teaching, the process of like, hey, you might not know this today, but you will know something better tomorrow, the next day, next week. And then by the audition, you got it. But no, a lot of these students are hating their life when they get up to that audition. I heard them, even though it's blind, I could tell the students who were shy and who were like, I really don't want to be here, but my band director is, you know, at my throat about being here. That's not a lifelong musician. That's not a lifelong person that will say, you know, I love my experience in the arts. I love my experience doing these things. When it comes to that, I really say we need to question, what is it for? What are we doing this for, and who are we doing this for? Because if the answer is for the kids, creating children who will, by the end of their 6-year career between 6th grade and 12th grade, say, I would never want to play this clarinet again, I don't think we're doing our job at all.
Correct.
At all.
Well, you got a taste of our UIL region, excuse me, that's specifically TMEA all-state process. And we have some unfortunate stories about that. You know, we were in Houston ISD the majority of my career, where we didn't have structured or very prevalent private lesson programs. If anything, we would fund through our boosters master classes, and then maybe even supplement sometimes. Like if a kiddo we know had a chance to advance, then we would find a way to find him at least 1 or 2 private lessons, right? And I can still remember being in Region 23, where it still is Katy ISD, A-Leaf ISD, and Houston ISD, and we would be at these high school auditions for Region Band, and you could hear folks say, "Wow, these inner city kids can actually play," like out loud. And so, you know, at that time, I still was an employed public school music educator, so I didn't do what I probably wanted to do and react the way I wanted to react. But that, I thought to myself, why wouldn't they? Right? Like I literally was thinking that right away. And that's why we promote the fact that poverty is not a learning disability. And so when you finally get the kids an opportunity, we can tell you about Chuy Martinez, who's now a band director and a former section leader for the Prairie View A&M tuba section. He marched cadets, marched guardians, and then plays with a banda sinaloense locally here in Houston, right? And I, former high school student that had no private lessons, but ended up in the wind ensemble for Region 23. And so when people like seeing him, but what people don't see is that me and Justin or myself had to take him to the rehearsals because his parents were cleaning apartments or offices in that evening. And so he couldn't be there. So even the next morning I picked him up, and we always had this thing where like, if you make Region, we buy you dinner. Like, no, we do. Like our boosters don't, we did. And so I remember taking Chewy that weekend, and it was the only kid that made it to the Region Band from Houston ISD on the tuba. And I was like, all right, bro, what do you want to eat? And I'm thinking like, say it, like, what you want to eat? He's going to pick some Italian food. And he's like, I want canes. And I was like, bro, I'm going to let you buy whatever you want. He's like, sir, I want canes. Right. And I was like, okay. So long story short, I'm driving him to Canes, and a guy cuts me off, rolls down his window, and says an expletive, a derogatory comment towards Latinos at us. And so my heart was like racing. I'm furious, and I'm finally trying to call my wife to calm me down. We park at Canes. Of course, he busts a right to get away from us. And so he's parked right there. And I guess we had met up in the parking lot. I see him outside. I let Chewy go ahead and eat, and I go outside, and he didn't see that I was going outside, and I'm going to go pretty much charge this guy up. And I was like, hey man, why'd you say that? He's like, what? He's like, why'd you say that? And he's like, oh, you want to do this? And I was like, no, I'm not putting my hands up. And you could tell he wanted to squat. And I was like, no, I'm asking you why you did that. He's like, well, you cut me off. And I was like, man, the lanes merged, my dude. I said, I didn't cut you off. I said, if you can go back and look, the lanes merged. I promise you, I wouldn't even do that because I have a student with me. Their parents trusted me. I wouldn't even go about my way. And he's like, well, yeah, you did. And I was like, and if I did, I'm here to tell you I'm sorry. But I'm telling you I didn't, right? And then he's still like irate. And he's like, well, it's just people like you. And I was like, okay, hold on. And I said, I can tell that you're either an immigrant or a child of immigrants. Am I correct in assuming that? And they're like, yeah. And they were like, well, I drive all day. And I said, okay, I'm not putting that past you. But a young man just accomplished something that nobody else in his district just did. And I'm here to celebrate him. and take him to the next level in his musicianship. And all he can remember is the fact that you called us that by that name. And he was like, I owe you an apology. And he put his hand out and shook my hand. Now, I didn't know Chewy was looking at me the whole time. He's looking out the window and seeing this. And my wife, obviously got mad at me afterwards because she's like, something could have happened. Because even the man said, hey, you're crazy for doing that because you don't know what I could have been carrying. And I said, you're right. Right? You're right. Like, I'll take that. You're right. But I also didn't want to see my student go through that. And I need to make sure that he understands that he's worth more than that. Now, Chewy is a middle school band director in Houston ISD, right? Like, these are things that we look back on and that he's going to hopefully do that. And I got a text message from him. He's like, I can only hope that I can match the impact you had on my life for the students that I have today. Now, that's one kiddo, right? Like, that's one kiddo in my 15 years of being in the classroom of like, how many times did Justin and I just pull out a 5, say, you need gas money, right? Like, make it to the end of the week kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the moments that situational that happened with us, we were still trying to impart that with other students. So we weren't trying to break the bank. We weren't trying to go broke, but when we could help, it was a no-brainer. It was like, we're going to help. We're going to find a way. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to find you the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And we become products of what we already were exposed to. Like, me and Eric are not these one-offs of anomalies. No, we're examples of what a professor did for us on the campus of Prairie View University.
Yep.
We're examples of what Mr. Taylor, my black band director, did for me as a high school freshman. So I think that's another kind of layer of this whole conversation is you are setting up the next generation of whoever those people that have encountered you, how they will encounter other people and impact other people. So I can only hope that whatever information we gave to Chewy and the impact that we had, that those students that's sitting in his classroom, that they're still being taught to a certain extent by myself and Eric. Like, that's the beauty of what we get to do. That's the beauty of it.
And I think educators sometimes take that, like, we think we have the future of the country in front of us at the university level, high school, middle school. Mm-hmm. And they just sometimes complain, and they're like I have complained on this podcast about the writing samples of my music appreciation class. I'm not gonna lie, but I have taken lectures out. I'm like, y'all, I am awful at writing. Ask everybody around me. Like, I can't write.
Hey, your people nodding like crazy.
I'm telling you,
hey, you're right. Tell the truth. Tell the truth on this podcast.
I personally function as Michael's Grammarly.
I'm telling y'all, I will a whole page, one sentence. I write like a one sentence with like 20,000 commas.
Yeah.
And I like took a lecture out. I'm like, y'all, I know we're supposed to be talking about music, but I need us to talk about your writing. Mm-hmm. And this is your music appreciation class. We have a writing center. Yes, it's embarrassing to go to the writing center sometimes because we're all like, oh, we're in college. We should know how to write. And I said, here's the easy thing I learned. Just read it out loud. Mm-hmm. And if you stumble while reading, it's probably wrong.
That's good. That's good.
And literally, I was like, I'm going to take some examples from my former semesters. And I'm like, someone read this, please. And they're like, I can't. It's hard. I said, so is it right or wrong? They said, wrong. I said, great. Now I want you all to look at your last listening responses. I need you to read them out loud right now. and they were like, oh, and I said, oh, see, we're here together because we're all like, y'all, this future generation, they're tied to their iPads and stuff. But while they're in your classroom, and you have direct connection with them, do something different. Do something that you would want them to know tomorrow and impart whatever inside you. Like, if you want to impart manners, teach them about manners. Teach them, like, this is how we be respectful. And this is like, if I respect you, and if I say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, whatever, then let's do it back to me. Like, let's go both ways. Because I'm not up here and you're not down here. We're all humans.
Ooh, that's good.
Hey, so, man, to that point, I had to guide some of my colleagues when I was at Prairie View University. Like, they would assume, like, why don't these kids already have these soft skills that are expected of them in predominantly white institutions, right? Because that's been the primary of their experience. So them coming into this space, and I'm like, hey, it's not that they don't they don't want to, sometimes they don't even have access to those things. Like, you got to be willing to teach those soft skills if you're going to want success with your studio, if you're going to want success with your classroom. Like, if you just expect these kids to show up on time for class, I can tell you I was that kid that if I saw a little bit of leeway, well, I'm gonna take it, right? Like, ooh, I'm gonna take it, and I'm already 21 years old. So imagine the fresh out of water 18-year-old that's the first gen college student, that, you know, et cetera. Like, let's put all the nomenclatures on top of them, that of not having that experience or even conversation at home of how to operate in that space. And now you're a fish out of water culturally, socioeconomically, geographically, if you're going to another institution that's nowhere near your home. So I did my best to always, okay, hey, you were late today. Yes, sir. I overslept. Cool. All right. You know what? I appreciate you being honest. Thank you for being honest, because if I was you, I probably would have made up a lie just to make sure that my professor, you know, thought I was telling the truth. So thank you. But next time, I'm not going to accept that, because you're going to wake your butt up and you're going to be here on time. I'm sorry. I was like, you heard me, man. You're going to wake up and you're going to be here on time. I said, well, I had band practice till midnight. Cool. So did I back in the day. You can still wake up. Guess what you have? A time between your first class and the second class, so you could take a nap in that lounge or in your car. I was like, don't give me excuses. Find a way. Your point is to pass these classes. And I'd be that intense, right? But I wouldn't do that until, right? And this is a secret of what Justin and I always present on, is the fact that we made enough deposits into their emotional account.
Right.
Like, we know their name. We know their background. We know what high school they're coming from. We know maybe even the caliber of band that they came from or their experience, right? We did our homework to now be able to say, I'm going to take a withdrawal out of that with emotional account, and I'm going to check you. But we don't take that withdrawal until we make enough deposits, because we don't want to run the risk of overdrafting and the kid dropping school, the kid dropping our program, the kid dropping music completely. And so we're very cognizant of those things, and that's what we always push, like names first, like bare minimum. The thing you can first thing do is learn your students' names. You get the roster before you even meet them. And then I encourage, because of this digital world, if you are going to request some type of video assignment, that your first assignment is your students recording themselves saying their full name the way it's pronounced. Now it teaches them how to submit an assignment. Now you can tell they know how to turn their camera on and off. You can tell them, I need a little bit brighter. I need a little bit, all the things that you're going to probably end up doing on the first musical assignment. But now you have homework to understand and memorize your kiddos' names. That way, and if you keep perpetuating, well, I'm horrible at names. Yeah, if you keep saying that, you're going to be. But just like anything else, if we want to be good at it, we're going to work at it. And so that's big on us, and the fact that we will not take withdrawals until we make enough deposits.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's understanding, like, those things take time, and I don't think we study our students enough as much as we study the music. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we want to be we want to be affirmed by other directors, and which I think that has a place, right? Like, we want to be respected in our infrastructure, but I think there's a level of respect that we should be pursuing from our students, right? That if we take the time to study nuance, what does this mean? Or this student comes in here on this day, on Tuesday, they're always here. How do I honor that? How do I know that? That gives them a level of trust. Eric talks about this assignment of making them, say names and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I did, I taught in a majority Latino community for a good majority of my teaching career. And so I gave them the precedence to say, hey, if I mess your name up, you need to correct me. Well, no. And Eric had to tell me, from the Latino community, there's this level of respect that's given out just because that's a foundational thing within that culture. And so they would allow those teachers, higher ups, to mess up a name because they've been taught, hey, you seen, I heard, don't, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, nah, listen, if I'm saying your name wrong, I will embarrass myself. I will make myself uncomfortable for you to be comfortable and to be respected. And I think when we do that, it shows what Michael says, that we're not here, right? Yes, this may be our title, student, teacher, but in essence, this is where we live. This is where we live. And I want to be here so I can lead you, but I'll never get here if I'm constantly reminding you of this, but then never showing any level of grace and humility to say, I'm also a human being and I'm here, it always goes back to that for me, because I think we sit and we want to know, what's all the pedagogical tools, what's the tricks, how do I tune this chord, how do I make this, and that's great, but You can know all the information and that kid not even paying attention to you because you've gotten their name wrong from the first day of school and it's contest season. Now you're a little stressed and you know who I'm talking to. Let's tune that note. What are we doing? What are we doing? Now, if that relationship is there, those mistakes can be forgiven and that grace can be given by that student because they understand. Oh, I know, Mr. McLean. It's all right. My bad. I wasn't paying attention. What measure are we at? But you can't.
Or they understand they're in the heat of the moment, right? Like they know, like, nah, he knows my name. I know he knows my name, but right now we are out of tune and we better get our stuff together.
Facts.
Yeah. Something that you were talking about, when the teachers, say, oh, I just don't know the name, the complacency in that, and teachers being fine with not learning anymore. I feel like so many people get into these roles and they're like, oh, well, I've done all my studying, I'm done. But if you are a true educator, you know that you would never stop learning to the day you die.
Never.
Because the amount of students that come in front of you are different every single year, every single day, no matter what. So you got to learn it all over again, new things that you thought that you knew, but it might be a different little color this time. So you can never stay complacent. We have said on this podcast many times, when you reach a level of complacency, it might be your time to retire. It might be your time to let's move it on, because we cannot let the world, but specifically what we do, music, stop progressing. We just cannot do that. And when I was in Florida, we had this policy about dress code, and I understand dress code, I get it. And there was a teacher, she was an English teacher, and there was a kid that walked in my classroom who was out of dress code. And she was like, "You're not going to say anything?" And I was like, well, first of all, this is my student. Let me handle my student the way I know how to handle.
Hello.
Let's just check you right there. Number two, if you would have asked me, I would have told you this student hasn't been here in the past 4 days. So right now, the most thing that's important to me is that they are learning what they need to learn in this classroom and getting the love and the care that they need from me right now. That is what's most important to me. And also, you don't even know if this is the only thing that child has at home to wear. So number three, don't check me, because I know my students. Respectfully.
Yo, to that point, it goes into concert etiquette, right? Like, we're always turn off your cell phones, and I'm like, okay, cool. I can do that, right? It was one of my last concerts at Heights High School. My high brass instructor, who was my former private lesson teacher, came up and she's like, "Hey, Eric, can we make an announcement about turning off phones?" And by that point, I was running the soundboard for the second jazz band. I was like, yeah, I'll get on the mic right now, and I forgot. And then a phone starts ringing, and I was like, I forgot to say something, right? And then I hear the person answer the phone, and I was like, oh, it's even worse. Like, they answered it during the concert, right? And then I see the person stand up and keep talking and walk out to the lobby, right, to keep talking on the phone. Yeah, that person was my dad. And so I would much rather have the parents there, right, than not be there in the event that it doesn't follow in my opinion, sometimes outdated form of concert etiquette, and especially in schools, right? Like, my goal is I'd much rather have the parent there cheering, yelling for the kid, making them feel welcome, than trying to treat it like a UIL concert and sight reading, right? Like, nobody's being adjudicated right now. Yep. It's about showcase, it's about celebration. If we're truly making it a holiday concert, let's make it a celebration, right? Like, instead of sit down and everybody be quiet now and nobody can entertain, right? But only in jazz bands we can entertain a clap during an ensemble or rehearsals, and so I'm real big on, because I know Omar Thomas says that a lot in his pre-concert lectures. It's like, if you feel something in you that you want to clap and you want to move, you want to dance, by all means, I encourage you to do so. I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace and be willing to take that risk out of tradition, or certain people's tradition, so that way we can really focus on the fact that we are teaching more kids music and giving them access to music instead of making it look and sound and be a certain way. So that my kids never had tuxes and gowns, but they had all black, right? Like we can make that work, you know. And I would joke with them. I was like, hey, I truly want all black, not the faded black that's now gray now. Like let's make an effort to do that. But Mr. I ain't got no money. Then I would always bring my experience, and I'm like, cool. You know, there's this things, and I was like, and if you're willing to do this, there's some things called thrift stores where I used to shop at when I was in school. And I was like, but people didn't know that I was buying Polo and Tommy Hilfiger and Nautica, and people be like, man, you shop at Macy's, and I was like, yeah, that's what you think, but I got it for 50 cents at that thrift store, right? Like as long as it's all black, like by all means. Now, did my booster still have to buy a couple shirts, a couple pants, and not let the band know? Yes. Yes. And that happened because of the interaction and the trust that the kiddos had with Justin and I to be able to come up and say, I really tried to go find something, but there wasn't nothing at the local thrift store. Can I get some help? And we're like, we got you. But we also got to a point where our kiddos felt safe enough to go ask their own section for help. They were not afraid to let them know, I'm not in the best place right now. And they themselves, the section leaders, would either do it themselves or they would do this kind of collection and be like, let's get so-and-so some pants. We got them. Like, we take care of our own. So we truly try to create that we got each other, like us against the world kind of culture and community within our programs.
That's so important that you said that, because when you were speaking of that story earlier, where you went out and confronted that man who said that, word in front of you and your student, and he was able to see that relationship that you did, that just one moment you made a choice to go confront that person, and he saw what happened when you did it. Your students see you. We say this a lot on this podcast, but your students watch you in the band room, outside the band room. You don't know how they see you interacting with the choir teacher, the principal, the janitor, like whoever. And they are going to start reflecting those relationships right back at you.
Real.
So when you're doing them well and they're seeing that you pour into anyone who you have a relationship with, they are going to want to do that themselves with each other. And it becomes natural, becomes normal. They don't even question a friend saying, hey, like, I can't find a shirt. Can you help me? Or like, I don't have lunch money today. Like, it's something they're like, well, of course.
Yep.
Obviously.
Yep.
It's so significant that we have to recognize the impact, not only in what and I think Eric, you said it when we first started, like, don't just talk about it, be about it. Because there are people who we hear them talking and we hear them saying that this is what they're doing, but you really see it when you see the product of what they're putting out, the students and the impact, the relationship, and it keeps giving. It just keeps and you don't run out. I love the idea of like the emotional bank you pour into, because the thing about it too is you cannot demand the greatness of them. You can't say, I want ones. I want you to practice if you're not also asking, how are you? Like, what's going on in science this week? Are you guys learning anything? I hated the periodic table, but it's good for you. I don't know. Like I did. I don't know. Just talk to them like they're humans, and they'll just start. That's a moment for them just to connect with you, and then maybe they'll go on and do the same with someone in their next class. You never know.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how I start every lesson. Is like, I'm like, how was your week?
Yep.
They try to glance over and I'm like, put that trumpet right on that stand. How was your week or your day? Like, you don't have to give me all the details. Just let me know where you are mentally.
Right.
So I know, am I on 10? Am I on 5? Am I on like, you are amazing? Am I your cheerleader today? You know what I mean? Like, where am I on the, not harshness, but like how much I'm going to demand out of you scale? Because I need to know where you are emotionally. And one thing I was going to say right after Lauren, or right after y'all were speaking and Lauren, was like, I got called out kind of in an indirect way, because I do work at some schools and stuff outside of my university schedule. And someone like emailed me. They're like, hey, Michael, I know you're busy. And I was like, I hate when people say that. Like, if you're a student of mine, you have my time, especially when I'm at school. But I looked back and I'm like, I'm always on my phone. I'm always like answering texts, answering emails, doing that stuff. So of course my kids know that I'm busy, but they don't need to know that. So like when I go to this school, I make a conscious effort of putting my phone in my trumpet case, so I can like eliminate that thing. So when I'm there, from like whenever I'm there, that they have full attention. And so I don't get that email like, hey, I know you're busy, but can we do this next time you're here? Yes, you just ask me when I'm there, and I'm there. So I had like, sometimes you get checked by your students by a phrase and you don't even know it. But you have to respond back with a good action, or then the like deposit they took from you, you're going in the negatives.
That's real good, because the fact that you're willing to take that critical feedback from your students says, unfortunately, that we probably have all experienced some type of educator that wasn't, right? Like, they claim to have opened the door and provide the space for feedback, but then once you do, they lock up, or they provide the excuse as to why that happened, right? Instead of, you know what, I'm sorry you feel that way. I want to make it clear that you have direct access to me, right? And like, I've had those moments as an assistant principal where the recent immigrant parent would be like, "I'm so sorry to bother you," and I'm like, you have every right to speak to me. I would much rather speak to the parents that are interested in their child's well-being than the parent who claims that I'm lying on their child for stealing the phone, and I turn the screen around and then I have it on video, right? Like, in those moments, sometimes that's where sometimes the cultural tendency comes in. But we, having that ability, having that power to redirect that framework, to redirect that front mindset of saying, I respect the fact that you said that, but no, you have every right. Like, and I was wrong. And then that willingness, I think that's a big selling point right now, is that we need to be more critical of ourselves. And I actually wanted to bring up a point, and Dr. Adrian Davis put up a status 2 days ago. All right. And he put in music education, the same energy and mindfulness for performing music created by historically marginalized, minoritized, and excluded people, and hiring special guests to display performative wokeness or to meet yearly diversity quotas can or should be given in recruiting those same people for school music ensembles, music programming, and music leadership at these PWIs. Otherwise, most of the trending acronyms adopted in education to signify social progress are merely socially deceptive cadences.
And we know that to be true because a lot of what happens in these rooms it is just a show. It is a show. It is when you're, I say this all the time, and me and Eric used to joke about this. The great relationship you have with your kids, we understand what we have to do in the teaching moment, in the learning moment. But as teachers that teach in that high school, middle school phrase, you have that principal that comes in to do the observation. You know what they want to see. You may be in the midst of fixing something. There may be even just a conversation that's needed about upcoming things, but that person walks in. You have that connection with your kids to be able to say, hey, let's get this done real quick, and then get back to what we're doing. And that's the beauty that we get, that there's this unspoken language in that classroom that happens. But for most of what that is, are directors that are, they're playing charades. They're playing charades, but they're expecting kids to just buy in. And it's like, this is not a real thing. This is not a real place. I'm here to check a box. And you get upset with them when they check boxes, but they don't want to. Then all of a sudden, you're past the moment of competition. You're past the moment of getting what you need. And now you're like, hey, what's going on, man? How y'all doing? They're like, what are you doing right now?
This is brand new.
Right. This is weird. Because you have not been, and we have not been as a whole at times, we have not been transparent and honest and really caring for those that are in front of us. That's just the sad reality that we live in.
And unfortunately, it's looked down upon as, when you go to school to be a music educator, in some places to take time to develop those human relationships, especially when you're going to be a music educator, because it's always, you're taught, you got to make sure balance, blend, articulation, this, that. They never, in an education standpoint, for most people, talk about, well, one, you need to make sure that your children are there, are present, they are, ready for this. Do you know who they are? Do they know who you are? It's always looked down upon, especially, when you first, like in the first couple of weeks, where you say, what, we're not going to pick up an instrument. Today is going to be all different types of activities. Where it's again,
don't you do that? Don't do that in the classroom.
See, that's a big no-no. And I'm like, you know what? This is my classroom.
Right.
What needs to be done for me, my students, and inside these four walls, this is the main importance here.
Yep. And
I don't think future educators that are currently sitting in those college classes, they are getting that, because when I went through those, the classes to be a teacher, they were like, don't do that. You need to focus on everything else but the students. The students they'll find their way to you. No, That's not true because I sat in a band program in high school where I didn't really know if the band director knew my name besides he knew I played the euphonium. He knew that I could probably get to the district band and to the altos and all these things. That's it. And so now it's like when I see my own high school director, it's hello. It's never something more than that. So
that's oh man, that just breaks my heart.
And that has always been my mission, to be the opposite of that. So I love hearing people's stories because it's so different of how we meet in the middle. Of you two had, you know, wonderful mentors leading up to how you got there. And then I'm on the other side of like, well, I didn't have that growing up. So now I'm gonna be that for the next person that I happen to be in front of. And so it's kind of our fight to create this community, this culture of what music should be and what the learning process should be for our students. And there's something I wanted to touch on that you said, Eric. I wrote it down here. Certain people traditions. When we talk about concerts, certain people traditions, which is usually Western classical, very Caucasian. No shade, Michael. Traditions of how. We belong.
I think Michael knew that.
Well, that's the thing. People that have been loyal listeners of Relative Bitch, y'all know we always have to say it. Michael, you know, we love you, Michael. We do. But for real, because I'm gonna tell you right now, you know, I grew up in the Black church and Black spaces. So
Come on in here.
We was clapping, we was shouting, we was doing all these things. And I would never forget my first time in my first ever choir concert when I was in 6th grade. And it was so quiet. It was like, oh, did we do good? Did we do bad? You know, what is that? So we have been trained to adopt these traditions. And I'm sorry, like you said earlier, I want these parents to come to the concert because something that hurt me as a teacher, this was my first year as a teacher, and I had a student, and he was one of those students that was all over the place, but he found out he was a good clarinet player. So he put all of his time to being clarinet. And we got to the spring concert. He was a beginner, and his dad wasn't there, and it just tore him up. He was like, my dad is not here. He's crying. So this is 20 minutes before a concert. And you know, band directors, choir directors, any director know 20 minutes before a concert, your brain is on 10. But I was like, I need to be here for this student right now because this student needs me way more than whatever I need to take care before this concert. And so I just sat him down. We were in my office for 5 minutes, you know, pouring into him. And you know, we went out to the concert. He did his thing. And then come to find out his dad actually got there right before he was able to perform. And it just changed everything for this child. Everything. I'll never forget that. To see how much that hurt him. To see how much his parents are there. I don't care. I just want the parents there because that is what's going to make that child feel whole and feel seen and feel like, wow, I can continue to do this. I feel good. And that's what I always want to instill in those children. Yeah,
that's good.
Wow. That's good. Look at us. First of all, oh my gosh, it's been a whole. I cannot believe.
It's crazy. I mean, one thing I did want to, you know, talk about because like relationships, I feel like that's been like the central part of like what our conversation has really been. And we haven't even had a moment to talk about the relationships of how these podcasts even began. Like for us, you know, we as individuals, me to Michael, me to Anthony, Michael to Anthony, like had individual relationships like together as well. And then it became what it is now, where we just were hanging out as a trio, sometimes with like other people as well throughout undergrad. And ultimately it led us to what we wanted to do, is just share our perspectives on what's going on in the world that we saw that was needed, you know, and especially for us coming out of undergrad in 2020 and graduating undergrad in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. we thought it was needed. There were so many different topics swirling. There was so much uncertainty in the world. And what I feel like what really fueled us and what continues this podcast is the fact that we have such strong relationships with each other. And I think that's something that our listeners know, even when we're ragging on Michael. Michael knows we love him. Michael knows we love him. But like, I wanted to also hear about a little bit about the origin of like y'all's relationship and how you pour that into your podcast.
Well, it was dope, and then we didn't plan it, right? There, both of us are wearing PV gear right now. So, Prairie View University is both of our alma mater. Justin is a year younger than me, and so we got to meet there as undergrads. Justin's first job was with me. We got to work together at Hamilton Middle School, and he can tell you that I pretty much.
I just want to clear this up real quick. So, this is my guy, I love him to death. When he says my first job was with him, it was more so of a voluntold. I was already, he had set me up with another job, and then on the back, like literally called me a few days later, was like, hey man, like my numbers are crazy over here. I was wondering if you'd be interested. And he was like, I just really see something in you, man. I was like, man, that means a lot. Yeah, I mean, of course, bro. Like, yeah. So then I come to find out that's his speech for a lot of things. Yeah. I just want to put that out there. He's a great guy, by the way.
So yeah. So then Justin got to work at Hamilton Middle School for 8 years. He was the assistant there with me, and then he took over the program and kept the success going. And then when I got to Heights High School, which was the feeder high school, and that was kind of my like, to be honest, was my dream kind of public school that I wanted to serve because I was zoned there, but I chose not to go there because if I had gone there, I would have gotten in a fight in the first 2 weeks. So I went to another magnet school, but all my best friends graduated from there. I was the DJ at the prom, at the all the events. I was in the yearbook, even though I didn't go to school there, right? Like I was that kid. So I always wondered, like, man, if I could take over that school. So after the year of being an assistant principal, although I was successful, I didn't like it. My wife was the one that encouraged me, like, go back to do what you love. Took over there. I got 1 year, and then by the second year, I asked Justin, "Come on over, man. We need an assistant director, but also I need the percussion to take it to the next level." So he came over and finally became an assistant director and director of percussion. And then that program, we took it from 56 kids to 165, and the first time an area marching contest, 5 concert bands, 2 big bands, a mariachi program, and we had just started an orchestra program there. Award-winning indoor group, and then an award-winning color guard. And so we did things there that didn't happen in that school's history. And a lot of it was based on our conversations of optimism, of if we don't have that, how do we get it? And so our conversations were very positive oriented and solution driven. So even in our office, even though we might be talking like this, we were literally, all right, bro, we ain't got money to do that. How much do we need to fundraise to bring that clinician in, to bring that master class in? How much do we need to get on the books? Or we don't have that. How can we supplement that? How can we fit that? How can we get, literally we were saying, we were pretty much, if somebody tells us, just tell us no so we can go find the yes. And that's how we operated because we were a site-based managed district that everything was per request through our principal. We didn't have a line item budget through our fine arts department. It was literally whatever you got was dependent on your principal. So our last year there, we would really open the doors because of my experience specifically. When I was at Prairie View, the local district would not let us come even do student observations, not even be a fly on the wall because we were from Prairie View. So this is, and what's crazy about that, let's fast forward now, I'm the resident clinician for both of their middle schools at that local district. And I said it to the kiddos. Like last year I said, like, congratulations on your straight ones, because even back in the day as a student, I wasn't even allowed in this room to give me my observation hours. So instead, we opened our doors up to anybody who wanted to learn from us. So a lot of those kiddos came from Prairie View University, Sam Houston State University, and then University of Houston. And so, but these were students that were specifically geared towards, I want to teach a marginalized population, a black and brown population, and a Title I school. Like, they already had their mindset. This is why I'm going to school. I'm going to go serve this community. So Dr. Corey Mills was the one that would plug them in and saying, hey, Eric, I got this student that's interested in serving this population. Can I connect you to? Right. And so then I would say, hey, you want to come over and give a master class? And then we'll cover the first master class. And then from there, you can offer private lessons. And that way I give my students an insight into your teaching, and they might be hooked on it. And then I would encourage you also to offer, whether it be duets or trios or quartet options to, help facilitate the cause. So I gave them the solutions, right? Well, 2 of those students ended up being on our staff, right? Like I made them part of our staff. I got them staff polos. They'd go to contests with us, and then I would help supplement their gas and different things through the booster. It wasn't necessarily a paid position, but when it was time to get hired, I told them, put that on your resume. you a tech at Heights High School during years and year and put my name and Justin's name, because that already had carried some weight. So when they get an interview, you could put those down as a reference, and they can say, oh, wow, you worked with Heights High School when they went to area that year? Tell me more, right? And now if anybody's going to fact check that, they're going to call us, and we're going to say, yeah, they worked with us, right? We don't need to show a W-9 or anything like that. It was that. Well, it was those students that would tell us in our office, y'all should record a podcast. And we'd be like, whatever. Like, yeah, like, no, the stuff y'all talk about in this room, like right now, y'all should. And we're like, yeah, whatever. Like, yeah. And we pushed it off for a whole year. It wasn't until I left the classroom to go take my doctorate full time for the year residency that it gave me the time and space to collect the materials, the equipment. And then we got a corner office in my dad's office in north side of Houston on 45 and Cross Timbers that we would meet on a Sunday before we knew how to handle Zoom and just start recording. And we knew because there wasn't really a conversation like the one we're having right now in a space, right? We'd go to TMEA and it was flaunting with all the top of the top of the best of the best, the pedestal of the pedestal, right? Yeah. And we knew we were like, man, where are our people? Where are our topics? Where are the people that we know are like OGs in the game but aren't getting the love up here? Is it because they weren't honor band? Was it because, all the things? And so we just chose to start kind of challenging that notion to speak in our own right. And then Justin can kind of talk about this is save what's the podcast, Justin, you put me on? The Two Black Men Liturgical. Pass the mic. Yeah. And so he put me in because he was the one that put me on podcast. I'm traveling to Mexico and I'm listening to this podcast about two black men, very well educated, but they're like, hey, bro, I got a bone to pick with you, man. Like, how come I found out through IG that you cut your hair and you got a fade, right? Like the stuff that like we talk about, like we boys, and I'm going to find out through IG. And I'm like, but this man has a doctorate, right? Like, and it almost gave me permission to speak in my Texas twang, in my Swisher House Northside upbringing, right? Like you're going to hear some of those influence, my PV dialect, if you want to call it that, like, right? You feed me. Like it was a phrase that was prevalent in my freshman year at Prairie View. And so those kind of things, we just chose to like, let's talk the way we talk. Let's bring these people that aren't getting the space and the acknowledgement at these larger conferences that they deserve and long overdue. And let's create a platform and a medium that just shares this on a wider scale. And to our surprise, people actually liked it. We were out there like every time we hit the record button, we're like, bro, that's it. We're not presenting at Midwest. We're not presenting at TMEA. Like people are not going to like us. And sure enough, we've been able to do both on a larger scale. So with that, hence why we just keep hitting record. It's because of those people that are getting us the emails, the messages, the willingness of y'all to collab with us, to trust us with your platform as well. That's what tells us like keep going. Even when we're dog tired, that's when we figure out a way to say let's set somebody up, let's put them out there. Or if we hear of a story that's worthy of sharing, then we're like, come on, let's get you on the podcast because people need to hear about you.
I think the heart of it goes back to, I think the core of it, this is a fruit of us trying to be helpful to people. The move from us trying to help students to say, okay, who helps the Eric and Justin that's coming out of not just the HBCU, but that's coming out of the U of H or the SAM or the Rice? Who helps those students? Who helps them come to grips with the reality that is painted as utopian in those educational classes like Anthony talked about? Who helps them? Because if we're going to be honest, a lot of help comes when you show yourself worthy. It doesn't just come just because you're an educator. Your help comes when they say, oh, well, I guess you're worthy of help, and I see that you got a few kids in the region band. Let's sit around and talk about your UIL schedule. Oh, you did well at UIL. Oh, you got text. Oh, you've done this. You've done that. And me and Eric was just like, man, somebody could make use of how we orchestrated our booster, or how did we navigate beginner band in high school trying to build a band program, or how did you build your beginner classes even though they were heterogeneous mix and not homogeneous? You know what I'm saying? How did you still build a band program when all of these things? And so our goal wasn't even to get to the masses. Like when we press record, we was like, man, if some folk around the city just hear it and use it, we cool. It wasn't until people started hitting us up and they were like, hey, this content's great. When's the next episode? We was like, wait, what district you from? Like, we had a misconception. We thought that the higher ups or those in the upper echelon were going to look at it and be like, we don't want to hear that. But they were the ones asking the questions. They were the ones that were saying, how did you do that? Well, what do you do in your classroom? And we just kept pushing record and relative pitch reached out, and here we are. That's
been the beauty of us. Most people credit that we bring up uncomfortable conversations in a very nuanced way that allows for a conversation to happen from both sides. And sometimes we go for the jugular, right? And that just shuts off the other person. It's like, well, this is why I don't do it, right? Like you already fed the stereotype, the narrative that they had created in their mind of, well, this is why I don't serve, undocumented immigrants, right? Like this is exactly why. And it's like, how did you get to that? And because I charged you up, but we tend to charge people up in a way that makes them think critically to be like, man, have I said that? Have I been guilty of that? Have I, And so a lot of our presentations, usually at least one person comes up and is like, I'm sorry, I said that. It's like, you never taught us. Like you don't know us an apology. But they're like, but I get what you're trying to do. Like you're navigating those feelings and those emotions of reflecting on yourself, and thank you for being vulnerable to do that, right? Now that you know to do better, right? Like that's where we're at with this space of like, we hope, and this is just so dope for us because like they use our podcast in undergrad courses and in graduate school. Like, hey, this is an uncomfortable conversation. How do we navigate this, right? Like some of you have worked in these settings. What would you do? And so I think, and what I love about it is like, we don't have to be the only one. Like as a metaphor, there's so many seats at the table. Like let it be, right? Like if you want to launch a mariachi podcast, launch one, right? Like go and prove the fact that if you launch a mariachi program, it doesn't take away from band, orchestra, and choir. It gives access to those 80% of students that aren't getting served through the fine arts. And maybe the kid that quit the band program or the orchestra program or the choir program because they didn't feel like they belong, but maybe that's a link that brings them back. So it's just, that's where we're at right now, just creating this space of like, I also wanted to give people a chance to say, wow, they talk like us, or they come from spaces like ours, or they eat the food like we do. We don't have to fake the front and try to tell everybody what my UIO program is for next year and just talk about that we're human, right? Like, and that's another aspect of what we're true, like the initiatives that we're doing. The TMEA HBCU college reunion is our thing. There's not a space for us, and if you try to make every small HBCU try to host their own reunion, they don't have the funds for it. But if I put them all together, hey, and then we make it a space that truly reflects our community, and that's what we get, both compliments and complaints, and the complaints are usually that your music's too loud and much more fun, so we want to leave our reunion and come to yours. And so we had a brass band last year. We had, the year before that, we had Houston Tillotson's like fusion ensemble, which was singers, musicians, horn players, a whole drum set, singing Frankie Beverly and Mays and singing Beyonce and doing line dances. And then a multi-generational example of the retired choral director from Prairie View with the undergrad and everybody in between doing line dances. And then I was like, we did a survey to follow it up. What did y'all think? And the responses that we got was, I have been teaching for 30 plus years, and it's the first time I felt seen and heard at TMEA, right? Like, and I'm like, all we did was put people together and do our thing, right? But then we're now getting that recognition. And I think this is my plea to everybody. If you have the ability to create that community and those spaces of affinity, even if in a smaller scale, do it.
Period. That, listening to y'all, it just parallels to some of the things that we set out to create as well. And shout out to Corey Mills, because he is literally linked between both podcasts. Corey,
you know what's funny about that? I'm literally texting him right now. Like he just sent me the Omar Thomas album saying, have you listened to this yet?
Yes. Corey was at Kennesaw State when we were at Kennesaw State. He was one of those professors that poured into us and really reached to each of us here. And so it's just funny how the world is small. It's smaller than you think it is. It connects to such a big amount of people. And I chuckle when you was like, oh yeah, we had some tough conversations. We'll never get invited to some of these, big conferences. And after our first season, we sat down and we kind of said, you know what? Let's take the training wheels off. You know what? We happen to say in our normal vernacular, especially mine, sometimes I get heated and some explicit words might come out, but that's who it is. That, I'm passionate about the things, especially when we're talking about music and how that affects, people that look like me, that come from places like me. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. But also what we're going to do is make you think about it. And let you see that this is how someone feels about this. So, and the last thing about, there's space for everyone. The door is open. And if there's a table you're trying to go to be at and they're not letting you there, child, close that door and go make you another room.
That's right.
It's one thing I have learned. At this point, I'm not worried about sitting at somebody's table who do not care for me, who do not need me there. That's fine because my table's over here. I'm sitting at the king's table. So y'all can pull up a table. You can pull up a table if you want. So,
Yeah.
space is open.
No,
I love that.
Man, that's good because I think that's the problem with all of, the proverbial table is that what we're ultimately saying is that you can't sit here. That's why we set these up. And I think the irony of that is when we look at music, when we look how our entrance, like we have a similar entrance. Church for me was the training ground for music before I got into the quote unquote the academy. And so for us to have all of these avenues to access music, but then when we get into the world, there's only one table, something don't seem right.
Okay.
There seems to be some level of dishonesty going on. And so for me, what is wrong with me being at Eric is doing such great work right now with the world of mariachi. There's a table there that there's a training that happens there that prepares you to say, hey, I like this table. I'm going to go to the classical table real quick. I'll be right back. And there's nothing that you did at this mariachi table. There's nothing that happened at this gospel band table that doesn't prepare you to sit at the Handel table or Brahms or whoever, right? Like these tables are all intertwined, and for us to try to create these barriers, it points back to our insecurities because we really don't want to build a real relationship and we don't want to have community. That's the ultimate thing. We don't want to have community, and like you said, I'm not gonna come force myself at your table.
I'm not.
It's okay for us to be at different tables and do the same work, but it is what it is. It's no love lost.
We're not. But here's the thing. I think some young folks are still trying to assimilate or be welcomed, or you know what I mean? That's just human nature of I want to be received. I want to be affirmed. I want to be celebrated. So I think if this is the dominant space, let me make myself fit into that space versus, this square is not going to fit into that circle peg. Like like I got things to contribute in that space, but I also carry all of this that I've suppressed that I can inform, right? Like, and one of the things that I love that we've been able to do, or through our presentations, once I follow it up, like they invite us to be keynote, but then they open up saying, these guys have motivated me to share my story. And these are folks that are old enough to be art directors, right? And we're looking at like, how did this young cat influence you? But most of them were Latinos or Latinas in this space, especially in the Texas band system, that they had to assimilate to that system. And they were very successful to that they had to suppress their Latino and Latina identity. And so now they're like, well, no, I grew up listening to mariachi music. Or Gabe Masella, who's the assistant director of UIO, is also a composer, has told me, he's like, hey, Eric, I was going to kind of do this Spanish dances kind of movement. Now I'm going to do it like the music that I grew up on in South Texas, and I'm going to do a guitarrón solo at the end of the wind ensemble piece. Like that's going to be the final movement because that truly reflects sounds of my home, of a weekend, of a celebratory event. And I've shied away from that, like people who say like, oh no, I'm not Latino, I'm Texan, right? Or, it's like, wait, what? And so those kind of things is hopefully if you are in that generation of like, man, I have kind of trying to be one to fit in, these folks are giving me permission to not necessarily fit in because your community might not be there, but it's in a larger scale. It's somewhere else, and hopefully you can see that we reflect that part of the community for you.
This has just been such an amazing conversation, and I'm so honored to have been able to be a part of this collab and to just hear more about both of you as individuals, as well as like what you have poured into the work that you're doing on your individual basis, but also together. And I know for sure our listeners are going. Hopefully, hey, listeners, go check them out. Actually, go ahead and plug yourselves too for our listeners.
Yes, plug yourselves.
Yeah. Where can we find you? If we want to listen to you, where can we find you?
So for the podcast itself, at Pod of the Scores on all socials. We're on every podcast platform, with the exception of YouTube right now. We're still just on every listening platform. And then specifically myself, Jimenez86 on all socials. And then Justin?
_ Justin McLean _ at all socials. And man, you hit us up. We would love to. Just more than anything, I want to really hone in on this point that Eric said. We don't want to monopolize the conversation. we want to just be a platform for other people to be heard because we don't have all the answers. We have some answers. We have some things that have worked for us. But the same that we sitting here talking to y'all, there are things that people can say, hey, man, I saw y'all on such and such. Man, reach out to them.
Yep.
They have resources. They have been places that we have not. They have been in spaces that we have not. And so more than anything, we just want to continue to be an extension of what we're doing right here. Knowing somebody that knows somebody else that can help the next person. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep it going, not just past this episode. So we hope everyone enjoyed the conversations, the relationship building that was happening here, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.